The wind screamed across the frozen plains, carrying sharp ice particles that cut into any exposed skin. Rylan pulled his thick coat tighter and adjusted the thermal scarf around his face. The night shift on this remote ice planet was always the hardest. But tonight, the cold seemed almost alive, as if it wanted to break into his bones. He trudged along the outer perimeter of the supply station. His boots crunching on hard snow, his breath forming clouds that disappeared quickly in the biting air. The floodlights above flickered in the storm, sending moving shadows across the ground. Rylan scanned the crates stacked against the wall, just to make sure nothing had been moved by the wind. At first, he thought it was just a loose tarp flapping in the snow. But then he saw a shape, small, hunched, trembling. He stopped, squinting against the snow. It was not a piece of equipment. It was alive. He stepped closer, and the figure turned its head toward him. Under a torn blanket, two large eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Her skin was pale, not human pale, but almost silver. With a faint shimmer that caught the light, she was tiny, barely reaching his waist. And her arms hugged herself tightly as she shivered violently. The snow had collected on her hair, and her lips were turning blue. "What the hell?" Rylan muttered under his breath. He crouched down, pulling off his thick outer jacket. "Here, put this on," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. The girl shook her head quickly, whispering something he could barely hear over the wind. He leaned closer, and her voice reached him, broken and quiet. I can get warm another way," she said, her gaze locking with his. There was something in her tone, not just desperation, but intent. Rylan froze, his mind trying to make sense of her words. He had met alien refugees before, but this felt different. This girl didn't just want help. She was offering something in return, and he didn't like where his thoughts were going. The station rules were clear. No unauthorized contact. No taking in strays, and absolutely no personal deals. But she was shaking so hard now that he could hear her teeth clattering. If he left her out here, she would be dead in minutes. The wind roared louder, as if urging him to make a choice. He looked around. The cameras in this section had been damaged days ago by the storm. No one would see. He draped his jacket over her shoulders anyway. The fabric was huge on her, swallowing her small frame. Her fingers clutched at it, but her eyes never left his face. "Inside," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. She hesitated, then nodded once. Slowly, he led her toward the side door of the station, his boots leaving deep prints in the snow, her lighter steps barely marking the ground as soon as they stepped inside. The warm air hit them, fogging his visor. The girl flinched at the sudden change in temperature, but didn't let go of the jacket. The room smelled faintly of oil and heating coils. A familiar scent to Rylan, but probably strange to her. She stood by the door. Her silver skin, now more visible under the yellow light. Her hair was white. Not from age, but naturally so, strands falling messily across her face. Rylan took off his gloves, rubbing his cold hands together. "You're lucky I was on patrol," he said. She tilted her head, as if studying him. "You didn't have to stop," she said softly, her voice calm now, but still carrying that strange undercurrent. "Most humans walk past," she added, her eyes narrowing just slightly. Rylan frowned. "Where are you from?" he asked. She didn't answer, just took a step closer. The heater in the corner clicked as it worked harder against the storm outside. She stopped right in front of him, close enough that he could see the faint trembling in her shoulders. Her eyes were unlike any he had seen before, silver with hints of violet, almost reflecting his own image back at him. "I know how to get warm," she whispered again. Rylan swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Every instinct told him to be careful. But another part of him saw the truth. She was scared, freezing, and alone, still. Her words left him unsettled. This wasn't just a meeting between a guard and a refugee. This felt like the start of something far more complicated outside. The wind howled against the walls, but inside, the room was filled with a different kind of tension. Rylan knew one thing. Whatever happened next, his quiet posting on this frozen rock was over. And the tiny alien girl with the silver skin had just changed everything. Rylan led the tiny alien girl down the narrow hallway toward the sleeping quarters, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. The storm outside still roared, but inside the station, it was quiet, too quiet. Every step reminded him that what he was doing went against regulations. He wasn't supposed to bring strangers in, especially aliens, without clearance. But the image of her shivering in the snow wouldn't leave his mind. And he knew she wouldn't have survived until morning. The girl walked close behind him, her bare feet making no sound. Her eyes scanned everything, the walls, the lights, the metal doors. It was as if she had never been inside a place like this before. When they reached his small room, Rylan opened the door and gestured for her to enter. The room wasn't much, a narrow bed, a small desk, and a heater in the corner. She stepped inside slowly, looking at the bed as if it were something strange. Rylan closed the door behind them, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. He went to the heater, turning it higher. "You can sit here," he said. Pointing to the bed, she obeyed, pulling his oversized jacket tighter around herself. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The warmth began to color her cheeks again. But her hands still gripped the fabric like it might vanish. Rylan reached into his desk and took out a ration pack. "Eat this," he said. Handing it to her, she looked at it, then at him, tilting her head. "You give food before asking?" she asked softly. Rylan frowned. "That's how it's supposed to be," he replied. Her expression changed, not quite a smile, but something lighter than before. She opened the packet and took small bites, chewing slowly as if she wasn't used to eating without rushing. He sat across from her, watching her cautiously. "You have a name?" he asked. She nodded. "Lyra," she said, her voice almost musical. "Where were you before you came here?" he asked. Her eyes flickered away, and her shoulders tensed. "I was in a camp," she said finally. "They said we had to earn our place. Earn our heat." The way she said it made Rylan's stomach twist. He knew enough about the mining camps on Outer Worlds to understand what that meant. It wasn't just work they demanded. It was survival through trade, and not all trades were for goods. Lyra's gaze met his again, her silver-violet eyes unblinking. "They would take warmth from us," she said, "in exchange for letting us live another day." Her voice was steady. But the way she wrapped his jacket tighter told the truth. It had cost her more than she wanted to say. Rylan leaned back in his chair, fighting the urge to promise her safety he wasn't sure he could give. He knew if anyone in command found out she was here, he could be arrested for aiding an unregistered alien. The rules were not just words, they were orders, backed by consequences. But as he looked at her small frame sitting on his bed, her legs drawn up under the jacket, he wondered if the rules were worth more than a life. Before he could speak, a loud knock echoed from the hallway. Rylan's heart jumped. "Stay quiet," he whispered sharply, moving to the door. He cracked it open just enough to see Commander Brask standing there, his face cold and sharp. "Patrol report," Brask said flatly. Rylan forced his voice to sound calm. "Storm's too strong. Nothing moving out there," he said. Brask's eyes narrowed, scanning past him into the room. "You, alone?" the commander asked. "Yes," Rylan lied. Shifting his body to block the view, Brask stared at him for a long second, then gave a short nod. "Keep your eyes open. There are rumors of escaped labor stock in the area," he said. With that, he turned and walked away, his boots heavy on the metal floor. Rylan shut the door quickly, his pulse still racing. Lyra was standing now, her expression tense. "They're looking for me," she whispered. Rylan didn't answer right away. He knew she was right, and if they found her here, they wouldn't just take her back. They would make an example of him, still, when he looked at her. He knew he couldn't just open the door and hand her over. "You'll have to stay hidden," he said finally. She took a slow step toward him, her gaze never leaving his face. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. Rylan hesitated. "Because no one should be left to die in the snow," he said. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile curved her lips. "You're different," she whispered, almost to herself. Then she sat back down on the bed, still watching him like he was a puzzle she wanted to understand. The storm outside rattled the walls, the heater hummed, and somewhere deep inside the station, the faint sound of footsteps echoed. Rylan didn't know how long he could keep her hidden. But he knew one thing: the rules had already been broken, and there was no going back. The next morning, the storm had not eased. The wind still screamed against the metal walls of the station, and the snow outside moved like a living white ocean. Rylan stood in the narrow corridor, checking the security feed, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement outside. Lyra was still in his room, curled up on the bed under a pile of blankets, her silver skin faintly glowing in the dim light. She looked small, fragile even, but there was a watchfulness in her eyes whenever she was awake. It was as if she never let herself fully rest. The screen flickered, and the image changed to show the main gate. Rylan's chest tightened. 3 men in heavy black armor were walking toward the station. The kind of armor worn by private mercenaries, not military patrols. He didn't need to hear their voices to know who had sent them the mining camp. They were here for her. He stepped quickly back into his room. Lyra sat up instantly, reading his face like she already knew something was wrong. "They're here," she whispered. Rylan nodded once, his voice low. "You need to hide, now." She slipped off the bed and moved silently toward the small maintenance room at the far end of his quarters. It was barely big enough to fit her, but it was the only space without a direct line of sight from the door. Before she went in, she looked at him, her voice trembling. "If they find me, I won't come back," she said. He didn't answer. He just closed the door softly behind her and turned to face the inevitable. The pounding on his door came seconds later. He opened it to find the mercenaries standing there, their visors reflecting the hallway light. One of them stepped forward. "Station Guard Rylan." "We're conducting a search," the man said, his voice cold and without emotion. "For what?" Rylan asked, though he already knew. The man's tone didn't change. "An escaped alien asset. Female, small build, silver skin, was last seen heading in this direction." Rylan kept his face neutral, forcing his heartbeat to stay steady. "Haven't seen anyone out here but snow," he replied. The mercenary glanced past him into the room. "We need to confirm that," he said, taking a step forward. Rylan shifted, blocking the doorway with his body. "You need clearance from Commander Brask to search private quarters," he said evenly. The man tilted his head, as if weighing whether to push past or not. Another mercenary stepped closer, his tone mocking. "You really think you can hide someone from us?" Rylan let out a short, humorless laugh. "Hide someone? Out here? In this weather? No one in their right mind would be wandering in this storm," he said. The lie came easily, too easily, for a moment. None of them moved. Then the leader nodded. "Once, fine," he said, his voice low but threatening. "But if we find out you're lying, guard, you'll wish you froze out there instead." They turned and walked away, their heavy boots thudding against the metal floor. Rylan closed the door slowly, locking it this time. His hands stayed on the lock for a moment longer than necessary. He could feel his pulse in his fingertips. He turned toward the maintenance room and opened the door. Lyra was crouched inside, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide and unblinking. "They're gone," he said quietly. She didn't move, didn't even blink at first. Finally, she stood, stepping out into the warmer air of the room. Her voice was barely audible. "You lied for me?" He nodded. I did, he said simply. Her gaze searched his face, as if trying to understand why, in the camp. No one lied for us. No one risked anything for us. She whispered. He didn't know what to say. So he didn't say anything. She stepped closer, so close he could see the fine lines of her silver-violet eyes. You could have given me to them, and you didn't, she said. I don't give people to slavers, he replied, his tone sharper than he intended. She blinked. A flicker of something crossing her expression. Maybe respect, maybe something else. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the heater. Filling the space between them, Rylan knew the mercenaries would be back. Maybe with higher authority. Keeping her here wasn't just risky anymore. It was dangerous. But when he thought about the alternative, his jaw tightened. He would rather face them all than hand her over. Lyra finally spoke, her voice softer than before. In my people's way, a lie to protect someone makes you part of their circle, she said. What does that mean? He asked. It means, you're mine now, she replied, a faint, unreadable smile touching her lips. Outside, the wind screamed against the walls. But inside, the warmth between them was no longer just from the heater. It was something else. Something Rylan couldn't name yet, and deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Asterisk night came again, heavy and silent, except for the storm still battering the outside walls. The power in the far wing of the station flickered now, and then, casting strange shadows down the hallway, Rylan sat on the edge of his bed. Cleaning his sidearm, trying not to think about the mercenaries, Lyra was sitting by the heater, knees drawn to her chest. Her silver skin glinting in the dim light. She hadn't spoken much since the search earlier, but her eyes kept moving toward him like she had something to say. Finally, she stood, the blankets sliding from her shoulders. She crossed the small space between them quietly. The way someone moves when they don't want to startle another. Rylan looked up at her, his brow furrowing. What is it? He asked. She didn't answer right away, just stopped in front of him, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth from her body. When she spoke, her voice was low, almost careful, in my people's ways, sharing heat. Is not just survival, she said. Rylan blinked, not sure if he understood. She tilted her head, studying his reaction. It is. A promise, she continued. When we give warmth, we give ourselves. Rylan set his sidearm down slowly. That's not how it works for humans, he said gently. Lyra's lips curved into the smallest smile. I know you are different. Who? You gave me heat before asking for anything, and that is why I choose to give you mine. He leaned back slightly, unsure how to respond. Lyra, you don't owe me anything, he said. Her expression didn't change. This is not about owing. It is about choosing. She replied. Then, without asking, she sat down beside him on the bed, her bare feet curling against the blanket. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder, her white hair brushing his cheek. Rylan felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with the weight of what she was offering. This wasn't about warmth anymore, and he knew it, but he also knew. She had been hurt before, that survival had taught her to give too much. Too soon. Lyra, you've been through things, he said quietly. You don't have to. Promise yourself to me just because I didn't let you freeze. She looked up at him, her eyes catching the dim light. You still don't understand. She said softly, in the camp, heat was stolen, taken without care. Here. You gave it freely, without touching, without demanding. That is rare. They sat in silence for a while, the heater clicking softly in the corner. The station felt smaller than ever. The storm outside pressing against the walls like it wanted. To come inside, Lyra reached out, taking his hand gently. Her fingers were warm now. No longer shaking like they had been the first time he found her. You can send me away in the morning if you want, she said. But tonight, I want to stay here, next to you. Rylan's mind went to the rules again. The unspoken laws of this place, the danger of being caught. The threat of the mercenaries still searching for her. But when he looked at her, sitting there with quiet resolve in her eyes, he knew the decision had already been made. "All right," he said finally. His voice low. She smiled faintly, as if she had been certain of his answer. Then she lay down on the narrow bed. Leaving space for him without saying a word, he hesitated. Only a second before lying beside her, the heat of her body a steady reminder of the risk he was taking. For a long time, they just listened to the wind outside. Lyra's breathing slowed as she relaxed, her earlier tension fading. At one point, she shifted slightly, her hand brushing against his chest as if confirming he was still there. Ryland didn't move it away. He thought about how strange it was a few nights ago. He was just another guard counting the days until his posting ended. Now he was lying in the dark with someone the galaxy considered an asset. Someone who might cost him everything. When Lyra finally spoke again, her words were soft, almost sleepy. "If you keep me, they will come for you too," she murmured. "I know," he replied. She was silent for a moment, then said, "Then I will keep you warm when they do." It wasn't a threat, or even a warning. It was a promise. And in that small room, with the storm roaring outside and the heater humming faintly, Ryland realized that no matter what came next, he wasn't going to give her up. Morning broke in a gray haze, though on this ice planet, morning looked no different from night. The storm outside had calmed, but the air was still sharp and heavy with frost. Ryland woke early, his instincts telling him that the quiet was not safety but warning. Lyra was still curled up on the bed, her breathing soft, the pale shimmer of her skin catching the dim light from the heater. He let her rest a moment longer, but in his mind, was already preparing for trouble. He brewed a small cup of strong synth coffee, sipping it slowly as he checked the security monitor. His stomach tightened when he saw movement near the outer fence. 5 figures in heavy armor trudged through the snow toward the main gate, their black visors reflecting the pale light. These weren't random mercenaries. This was a coordinated search party. One of them carried a scanning unit, and Ryland knew exactly what that meant. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to find and take. He moved back to the bed, shaking Lyra's shoulder gently. Her eyes snapped open instantly, alert as if she had never been fully asleep. "They're here again," he said in a low voice. She sat up quickly, her gaze darting toward the door. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Once they find my heat signature, they will come straight for me." Ryland's mind raced. The station's heating system could mask a body's warmth for a while, but the scanners they carried would be able to detect life signs. "We'll have to keep moving inside the station," he said. "If they scan one room and find nothing, they'll move on." Lyra nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the blanket. She didn't look afraid this time. She looked ready. But Ryland knew readiness wouldn't mean much against 5 armed men. The pounding came at the main entrance first, echoing through the halls. Voices carried over the station's comms. Commander Brask greeting the search party with his usual cold tone. Ryland couldn't hear every word, but he caught enough to know that Brask was giving them permission to sweep the building. That meant they were minutes away from his section. He grabbed his coat and motioned for Lyra to follow. They moved quietly through the maintenance corridor, the hum of the pipes masking their footsteps. Ryland's mind mapped the station. If he could keep her moving between blind spots, maybe the scanners would take too long to get a reading. He pushed open a door to the old storage room, guiding her inside. The air here was colder, the heating coils damaged years ago. "Stay here until I signal," he said. Lyra caught his wrist before he could leave. "If they catch you lying again, they will hurt you," she said, her voice low but intense. "I've been hurt before," he replied, gently pulling free. He stepped back into the hall. forcing his face into a calm mask as two armored figures approached. They stopped in front of him, the taller one holding the scanning device. "Step aside," the man said. Rylan folded his arms. "This section hasn't had working heat sensors in months." He said, "You'll get faulty readings." The man's visor tilted slightly. "Then you won't mind us checking." He replied, pushing past Rylan followed closely, ready to block them if they got too close to the storage room. The scanner beeped faintly as it passed over walls and floors. Rylan's pulse pounded in his ears. The man adjusted the settings, scanning again for a moment. There was only silence. Then the scanner let out a sharper tone. The tall mercenary turned his head toward the storage room door. "What's in there?" he asked. "Broken coils and old crates." Rylan answered without hesitation. "Open it," the man ordered. Rylan's hand stayed on the door handle a moment too long. "Do you really want to waste time digging through frostbitten junk when your target is probably moving right now?" he said, his tone sharp. The mercenary paused. Glancing at his partner, the second man grunted. "He's right. Let's move to the next section." They turned away, the scanner's light fading. As they walked down the hall, Rylan waited until their footsteps disappeared before slipping back into the storage room. Lyra was standing near the far wall, her body tense, her breath visible in the cold air. "You didn't open the door," she said, her voice almost a question. "Didn't need to," he replied. Her eyes lingered on him, studying his face. "You're risking too much," she whispered. Rylan shrugged slightly. "I told you I'm not giving you to them." The station intercom crackled. Brask's voice announcing that the search was still in progress. Rylan knew they had only bought a little time. "They'll check here again," he said. "We need to get you out before that happens." Lyra stepped closer, her expression hardening. "Then I will follow you," she said simply. And for the first time, Rylan realized she wasn't just a fugitive anymore. She had decided he was hers to follow. Outside, the storm had begun to rise again, and Rylan knew they could use it. But escaping in this weather would be just as dangerous as staying. Still, he also knew one truth. The search party wouldn't leave empty-handed. And he refused to let her be the one they took. The storm outside had grown wilder, the wind howling like a living thing, shaking the walls of the station with every furious gust. Inside, the hum of the heaters and the faint metallic creak of the structure were the only steady sounds. Rylan moved quickly through the dim corridors, Lyra close behind, her bare feet silent on the cold metal floor. They had slipped past 2 more patrols. But the search party was closing in. He could feel it, like a predator circling its prey. His earpiece crackled suddenly, the voice of Commander Brask cutting through the static. "Guard Rylan, report to Checkpoint 2 immediately," Brask ordered. The tone was too calm, too exact. And Rylan knew it meant trouble. They were trying to pull him away from Lyra. To isolate her, he didn't answer. Instead, he led her toward the maintenance hatch that connected to the outer cargo bay. When they reached the hatch, Rylan punched in the override code, a metal door sliding open with a hiss of cold air. Snow swirled in through the gap, carried by the storm outside. "We're going out," Lyra asked, her voice steady but low. "If we stay, they'll corner us." He replied. Before they could move, heavy footsteps pounded in the hall behind them. Rylan turned, his hand going to his sidearm. 5 armored figures filled the corridor. Blocking the only way back, the leader stepped forward. His visor glinting in the flickering light. "Put the alien down." "Guard," the man ordered. His voice cold and clipped. "She's not a package." Rylan shot back, his tone hard. The mercenary ignored the comment. "You have one chance to step aside and keep your post. Refuse, and you're done." Lyra stayed close to Rylan, her small frame partially hidden by his body. Her fingers tightened on his sleeve. "They won't let you live if you hand me over," she whispered, so quietly only he could hear. Ryland didn't take his eyes off the leader. "I'm not handing you over," he said, loud enough for all of them to hear. The leader's head tilted slightly. "You understand what you're saying?" he asked. Ryland's jaw tightened. "I do," he said. The mercenary gave a short nod to the others, and in an instant, the corridor filled with movement. Two of them raised shock batons, while another lifted a stun rifle. The air seemed to crackle with tension. Ryland drew his sidearm in one smooth motion, aiming straight at the man with the rifle. "Last warning, back off," he said. No one moved for a heartbeat. Then one of the mercenaries lunged forward, baton swinging. Ryland sidestepped, his arm shooting out to slam the man against the wall, the baton clattering to the floor. The others surged forward, the sound of boots and armor echoing like thunder. Lyra darted sideways, faster than they expected, slipping through the narrow space between two armored figures. One of them grabbed for her, but she twisted away, her movements quick and fluid despite her small size. Ryland fired a single shot into the ceiling, the sharp crack making everyone freeze for a split second. "Next one won't miss," he warned, his voice like ice. The leader took a step forward, visor inches from Ryland's face. "You can't win this." "Guard," he said slowly. "Maybe not," Ryland replied, "but I can make sure you lose before I do." Behind him, Lyra had reached the open hatch, the storm's wind pulling at her hair. She turned, calling to him. "Ryland now." He backed toward her, his weapon still raised. The mercenaries didn't fire, not yet, but their tension was like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. Soon as he stepped through the hatch, Ryland hit the panel to close it. The door sealed shut, cutting off the shouting voices inside. They were in the cargo bay now, the massive outer doors already coated in frost. Lyra's breath came fast, but her eyes were fierce. "They'll follow," she said. "Then we move before they do." He replied. He crossed to the control panel, overriding the safety locks on the exterior bay doors. The storm outside roared like a beast, snow and ice blasting into the bay as the doors began to open. Ryland pulled Lyra close, shielding her from the worst of it. "Once we're out there, stay close, no matter what," he told her. She nodded, without hesitation, as they stepped into the blinding white chaos. The cold hit like a physical blow. The wind ripped at their clothes, the snow stinging their skin. Behind them, the sound of the bay doors slamming shut was almost drowned by the storm. They were free of the station for now. But Ryland knew the mercenaries wouldn't let them go so easily. He tightened his grip on her hand, guiding her toward the ridge where his personal shuttle was hidden. Every step was a battle against the wind, every moment filled with the knowledge that they were being hunted. But even as the storm tried to tear them apart, Ryland felt a strange certainty in his chest. He wasn't running to save himself anymore. He was running because she was his to protect, and no one was going to take her from him. Asterisk, the storm swallowed them whole, the world beyond the station reduced to blinding white and howling wind. Snow stung Ryland's face like shards of glass, but he kept moving, one hand gripping Lyra's firmly, the other steadying the small pack slung over his shoulder. Every step felt like pushing through water, the snow dragging at their boots, the wind trying to push them back. But the ridge wasn't far now, and beyond it, hidden under a camouflaged tarp, was the only chance they had left: his personal shuttle. Lyra moved with surprising speed for someone so small, her breathing sharp but steady. She didn't complain, didn't slow, and Ryland knew it wasn't just fear that kept her moving. It was determination. Behind them, through the roar of the wind, faint shapes moved in the white haze. The mercenaries had followed, their dark armor cutting faint outlines against the storm. "They're close," Lyra called over the wind, her voice tight. No, Rylan replied, quickening his pace. They reached the ridge, the snow deepening up to their knees. Rylan shoved the tarp aside to reveal the shuttle, a small, battered craft, but reliable, its dark metal glistening with frost. He keyed in the access code, the hatch opening with a hiss of warm air. Lyra climbed in first, her silver violet, eyes scanning the interior as if committing it to memory. Rylan followed, sealing the hatch behind them. The storm's roar fading to a muffled growl. The interior was cramped but functional, 2 seats at the front, a small bench behind, and storage compartments along the walls. Rylan dropped into the pilot's chair, powering up the systems. The hum of the engines was a comfort, steady and low, but the comfort didn't last. A proximity alert flashed red across the console. "They're right on us," Rylan muttered, his hands flying over the controls through the small viewport. The white haze shifted, dark figures emerging from the storm, their visors glowing faintly, weapons raised. One of them stepped forward, signaling for Rylan to open the hatch. Lyra's fingers gripped the back of his seat. "If you stop, they win," she said. Her voice like steel. He didn't stop. With a sharp flick of a switch, the engines roared louder, heat blasting through the vents as the shuttle shook against the snow. The mercenaries fired bright flashes cutting through the storm, but the armor plating held. Rylan yanked the throttle forward, the shuttle straining before finally lifting off the frozen ground. Snow and ice whipped past the windows as they climbed higher. Below, the figures grew smaller, their shots growing weaker in the distance. The storm worked in their favor now. Hiding their escape, Lyra sank into the seat beside him, her shoulders trembling. Though he couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from everything that had happened, her eyes stayed on him, unwavering. "You could have left me there," she said softly. Rylan glanced at her. "I told you, I don't give people to slavers," he replied. She leaned back, her gaze still fixed on his face. "And now you're mine," she said simply, as if stating a fact rather than a promise. They broke through the worst of the storm, the sky above a deep gray. Rylan adjusted their course toward the dark stretch of space beyond the planet's orbit. "Where are we going?" Lyra asked. "Somewhere they won't find us," he said. "Is there such a place?" she asked, her tone almost curious. "If not, we'll make one," he replied. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by the hum of the engines. Then Lyra reached out, her small hand covering his. Her skin was warm now, not the cold, trembling touch from when he first found her. "You saved me twice," she said, her voice low. "You've got a way of getting into trouble." He replied with a faint smile. She tilted her head. "Then you'll have to keep me close," she said, and there was something in her tone, not fear, not gratitude, but a quiet certainty. The console beeped a faint signal on the scanner. Not the mercenaries, not the station, just a faint beacon from deep space. Rylan changed their heading slightly. Away from the beacon, every instinct told him they were not safe yet. But as he glanced at Lyra, sitting beside him with her silver hair catching the dim cabin light, he knew safety was no longer the only thing that mattered. Keeping her was the planet's icy curve faded into the distance behind them. Ahead lay the endless dark. Lyra rested her head against the back of the seat, closing her eyes. Her voice was soft when she spoke again. "You said you're not mine because of debt, but because of choice," she murmured. "That's right," Rylan said. "Then I choose to," she whispered, her eyes opening to meet his. "In my people's way. When we choose, it means forever." Rylan didn't answer right away. He just looked at her for a moment, then back at the stars ahead. Forever, he thought, letting the words settle in the silence between them. Outside, the shuttle cut through the black like a lone spark in the void, carrying with it to lives bound together now by more than survival. And far behind them, on the frozen planet, the mercenaries would search in vain. Because the tiny alien girl who had once shivered, the snow was gone, and the human who had refused to let her go was never bringing her back.